Hello, welcome to weekly NGS meeting. NGS stands for Next Generation Shell. I'm Ilya Sher, the author of the project. Weekly meetings are about current progress and near future plans, sometimes farther plans, farther in the future. Okay, so let's do a bit of, let's say a table of contents. So so you could know what's in this episode. Okay, so first of all, AWS Lambda, it's still in progress. Not much to say about this. Then we will go a bit into M1. I got from work my new laptop. It's M1, so I did make some adjustments in NGS to accommodate this new setup. That's not it's not a big volume of things that I want to say, but it's still there. Then I was thinking about the concept of contexts, and I'd like to talk about that. I have no idea how much time that will take, maybe between 5 and 15 minutes, something like that. And then this week, there was like a social media activity around NGS, and I watched that unfolding, participated a bit, and I would like to go over and maybe augment my responses to the questions that I have seen. Okay, so M1. So I don't know if it's the operating system version or homebrew version, or I don't know what it is, but homebrew is now installing things into opt homebrew something. And it was not the case previously, so I needed to change CMake builds to accommodate that situation. It was like very small change, but it's now in there in the dev branch. So if you got the newer Mac OS or Homebrew or whatever, and you get some build errors, you should try the latest code from the dev branch. That's pretty much it about that. So let's go to contexts. As I'm like living my life, I have some of these ideas about context. So I take some notes, and then from time to time I go and update the wiki with what I think about that. So let's, before I share my screen and show the wiki and some particular thoughts, the overview of contexts. What are contexts? So like the most common context that we know is like current directory. Like it affects in which directory a certain program will run. So you cd to some directory. I think of it as a context. And another kind of context that we all know is environment variables, right? It affects the programs that are run from this shell. If you did export blah, blah, blah equals blah, 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 then this environment variable is available to the programs that you run and the programs that they run and so on. So it is also kind of a context. And if I try to define context, that would be something that would affect the programs that you're going to run. And I kind of try to generalize this concept of context. And I'll share my screen now, and we'll briefly go over the wiki page with some thoughts about this. Share screen. Firefox, and okay. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Open system preferences. Security and privacy. Okay, click log to make changes. I need to type my password. Security and Mac. Okay, so I check the box. Zoom as will not be able to record the context of your screen until it is quit. No, I will not be doing that. What else I can try? Can maybe try to share the whole screen. Huh. Well, it does appear to be working. I hope it works. Since I'm not 100% sure that it works, what I'll do, I'll actually also read what's on that page. Okay, let's navigate to the page. Okay, so context design. So the page is called context design. Some kind of definition. Context is anything that would affect execution of following commands. It's a generalization of current directory and environment variables. So I see many different types of contexts. For example, a file or a directory or environment variable or a set of environment variables. Also, the kind of what's useful for me is AWS profile, which says, okay, I'm now switching profile to work on particular project and or environment. I find that it would be useful that the shell would understand that it's a context. Because if, for example, I typed export AWS profile equals something, the shell should recognize it's now a context, and therefore I should have an indicator, which is like outside of the main area, but there should be an indicator somewhere that I'm in this particular context. Well, if you take bash, it would be usually in prompt or or it will be in prompt, and it can become cluttered if you have like many of them. So I think to move the context indicators to separate area, and I think there could be quite a few of them, right? I have profile, I have current directory, I have maybe some other environment variables which affect other programs. I have a Git status situation. I have Git branch. By the way, while we imagine this special area for context, also imagine that when you in UI, you click on this or press it, you'll have also a history of recent contexts. So you could switch easily. So for example, if I'm working on profile, I don't know, project A production, which is a separate AWS account. And previously I worked on project A dev environment. If I click on the indicator, I should have the history that, okay, I worked on project A in dev and prod, and I can switch. And of course, whenever you click that, it's all being transformed into textual comments, and they are run in the middle section where the comments are, the ones that you type also, and the ones that are generated by UI for you. So, and if the commands have textual representation, it has all the advantages of the textual representation, which is history, copy paste, and whatnot. Okay, so what else on the page? So I was in the requirements section, and it mentioned the context types. So what else context should be able to do? There should be automatic detection. Like I said, for example, I have export AWS profile. It detects the context. It understands that you're now in the context. Also, of course, if you do cd my folder, that's also should be detected and be some kind of indicator, and also history. Also know that some contexts are like per directory context, so it complicates the implementation a bit. So for example, Git branch is per directory. So we have per directory contexts. Also think facility to create new contexts. For example, I want to create new AWS profile. It needs this feature would assist me to create new section in the underlying configuration file. Well, of course, it must be pluggable because I'm not going to do all of that in the shell. It will be some additional modules. And there should be a concept of resolved context. So for example, if I'm using AWS profile, the resolved context would be AWS account number. So when I send some copy paste of what I'm doing to a friend, this copy paste should work on his or her machine. And well, what happens if you named our AWS profiles differently, right? So this problem should be solved also. Not so much sure about whether directories should have a property of absolute directory if you do cd. Not sure how useful that would be. And there are a couple of open issues which I already thought about a bit. I bet I can find much more open issues. So how context would relate to bookmarks, if there's any interplay with this other feature, which I'm kind of starting to think about. Bookmark right now in my mind, it would be any object that you see on the screen you can bookmark, so you can get back to this object later. And this maybe can be, bookmarks might be generalized into tags. So you would have maybe like different dimensions, so you can quickly find the commands by tags and or output objects, by the way. It's not only for commands. I don't know, need to think about this. And what would happen if we allow to mark any object in the UI as a context? Which types would that be? How would that work? That's like completely unclear for now. Okay, so that was about contexts. And now I would like to move to my final topic for today, and that was social media. Social media. So I have here open a few places where some discussion happened. I made a big font here because I'm not sure on which screen you're looking at. If you're on the mobile, this should be like good enough to read on the mobile, this size of font. I hope. I didn't test this actually. Okay, let's see the first comment. Okay, it doesn't look as good as a new shell for shell type things. And once you get beyond one-liners, it makes more sense to use an existing proper language like TypeScript or Go. Okay, so okay, and yeah, and props for having good list of alternatives. Okay, so first of all, NGS doesn't have any UI yet, and of course, any existing modern shell right now looks much better for the interactive use. And I'm actually not even having final design for the UI, but I have quite a bunch of thoughts about the UI, and I think it should be much more radically different from anything else that you have today. And why is that? Because what you have today is kind of incremental improvements over what we had in the past. And I'm really amazed that nobody thinks, okay, you run a command now, you have some object on the screen. Why can't I interact with this object on the screen? It's like amazing that nobody does that. And I'm not sure why. And on one hand, existing UIs in alternative modern shells, they look much better than Bash. But right now I don't have anything to show, so it's hard for me to argue, but I think what NGS will have will be significantly better. But it will take quite a bunch of time. Okay, so here I'm writing, it's worse, there's no shell yet. That's my answer to the comment about shell type things. Regarding makes way more sense to use an existing proper language. Okay, and that's kind of repeating frequently asked, not asked, but it's repeating thought from anybody who looks at NGS. Okay, why wouldn't I use just a proper language. So guess what? Proper languages, they're general purpose languages. They can't and they will not be as good as, say, Bash for manipulating files and processes. And NGS can do that because it's oriented in this way. It's focused on these use cases. So it's like, why wouldn't they use like, say, Python over JQ? JQ is not better than Python, right? Well, depends on the use case actually. So because JQ is focused on specific use cases, for these use cases, it's actually much better than Python or anything else for that matter. So, and that's how I want people to look at NGS. It's not generally better. It's better for the intended use cases because it focuses on these use cases. So I'm giving an example of there's function assert in NGS, and there's a type which is called program. And my example is assert program pandoc. So with these three words, one of them is a name of the program. You're doing something which is like a couple of lines, maybe 3 lines in Bash, and more line, and also more lines, more than 1 line in other languages. And why is that? Because first of all, program is a domain specific type which represents object of the domain. So programs, external programs, they are kind of one of the core concepts in NGS. It's the domain of NGS to know about programs. So when you write assert program, it means NGS is going to check path, find that program, and if it doesn't find the program, it will give you an exception, and it will not be just any exception. It will say program pandoc was not found in path. Here's the path, so please do something about that. This kind of, from my perspective, it shows the focus on the domain in NGS. Okay, I'm giving the link to intended use cases. Actually, there's a very good list of alternative shells, and it's maintained by Andy, the author of Oil Shell. So if you guys are not seeing the video, but are just listening to me, Oil Shell is one word. It's oil shell, but it's together. That's how you find it on the internet. Okay. Another comment. Looks interestingly, definitely worth a closer look. Going through the documentation as we speak. Looks a bit unfinished, but I'll install it and see where it can take me. Very nice. Appreciate that. So what I answered, yeah, please file GitHub issues. If you see any issues in NGS, which are bugs or like incomplete documentation, unclear documentation, guys and girls, open GitHub issues. I'm actually looking forward to it because for me, it's a priority to make NGS easier to use and be like more friendly. Poor man's PowerShell. Well, I'm kind of not answering that because this is completely unconstructive to the discussion. Okay, another comment. Another project describing itself as something modern and next generation with pandoc among the dependencies and no interesting features. Give me a break. I think that this person was actually on Reddit during the break. That's my assumption, because if you are on Reddit not during a break, it's not good. Okay. What else? So this was R programming on Reddit. Now we are going to R Linux admin on Reddit and kind of see that it's like perceived less good here in general, with less upvotes. I'm not sure if it actually means anything, but okay. Does it include common suggestions? I've been using Fish for a while now, almost entirely because of the fantastic common suggestion features. Nope, interactive part is not ready. Okay, what else? Okay, quite a bit of discussion in Hacker News, on Hacker News. So what we have here, I tried to like PowerShell, but found it unpleasant to use as a shell or scripting language. I agree. I did small amount of coding in PowerShell. I did read the around 1,000 pages PDF that describes PowerShell. It was probably something like user manual or whatever. My favorite part is when they explain that comparing to null is not actually doing what you think. Let's try to find that. Shell comparing null, not what you think. It was in the official documentation. Docs everything you wanted to do about null. And before I'm going to like bash PowerShell, I think that the word power in PowerShell is actually well deserved, and it actually exposes Windows APIs and whatnot, and you can do a bunch of things in PowerShell. I just kind of, let's say, disagree with language design, and that's another aspect. PowerShell null is an automatic variable, blah, 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 blah. Examples of null, impact of null in numeric equation, in place of collection, in place of an object, checking for null. You may have noticed that I always place the $null on the left when checking for $null in my examples. This is, oh, let's make the font bigger. So if you're on mobile, you should be able to read this. This is intentional and accepted as a PowerShell best practice. There are some scenarios where placing it on the right doesn't give you the expected result. Why? Because -EQ and the -NE comparison operators, they're not like actually simple comparison operators. They're doing something else. But I don't want to dive into this. I think that from my perspective, it just shows like at the very least some issues with the design of the language. Okay, let's close that, go back. Okay, so I actually do agree with this comment, but I didn't comment anything because I don't think like it would be like interesting for anybody that I agree on that. Maybe I should comment and, you know, to make this person know. I don't know. There are multiple, perhaps even many next-gen shells. PS is one, but it's not the only thing and shouldn't be. Yes, I agree with that. So what? I don't know. They are going to say something about PowerShell. Okay, and next one on lobsters. Let's see if anything changed. Nothing changed. Okay. Interesting, but what can I do with this that I can't do with either Bash or my favorite scripting language? I understand the question. It's actually very frequent question and thought, and I think it comes back to the focus of NGS on certain use cases, and that means that anything else that you will choose for these use cases most likely to be more verbose and more error prone. Let's see what I answered here. Yeah, I also mentioned a set program. Yeah, so it's we are back to the focus thingy, and okay, and if you're already comparing to Bash, I like the more time passes by, I more think that comparing to Bash is not very fair to Bash, because you know like how you can compare to something that was like initiated decades ago, and then nothing, almost nothing could be actually fixed because you would be breaking existing code. So this is a project from decades ago, and it doesn't make much sense to compare. But you know, if you're already doing that, then you know the simplest example is if you do $X in Bash, you don't know to how many arguments it expands. I think okay, my point of view, which is actually a kind of a guess, is that at the time the bash didn't have arrays, so there was like not much you could actually do about that. So they stuffed, some items space delimited in a variable, and then it was like expanded to several arguments based on the data that you have in a variable. You can't imagine that somebody is doing this today, right? That any argument that you pass to a function actually works like star x in Python, and you don't know how many. Just for looking at the code, you don't know how many arguments this will be. Yeah, and again, compared to general purpose languages, well, it's the focus, and you have all these functions. It's not only that, it's like kind of I took and refactored and factored out all these common things that you will be doing in bash, like for example defining your like debug and warn and error functions at the top of each script, because well, in bash it's somehow not common to use libraries, so you define these functions all over and over again, and I don't think it's productive. And not only it's not productive, it's like it takes a few lines from each script, and it makes you like, well, you should probably copy paste this, but what about if you like say forget to redirect it to standard error? I think like having this in the library is kind of no-brainer. It's used all the time. Just should have it. What else? Okay, so that was actually all in the social media this week. I hope my answers make sense. Don't hesitate to contact me on Discord. If you have more questions, I'll be glad to answer. So we went over 4 issues today. It was continuing progress to be able to run NGS in AWS Lambda. That's actually, there was no progress this week, but it's in progress like in general. The M1 and homebrew adjustments, the idea of context, and the overview of what happened on social media around NGS. Okay, thank you for listening. Subscribe, like, and what was the last one? I always forget the last one. Whatever, like and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.